Right, I've got a few apologies for today. Chris McIntyre, Jenny Leeson, Tim Lloyds, Penny Grant and Keith. You can't make it today. We have had about 5 now, I think, 5 new members. And I got a message that a donation button might do the trick, from a member. And I've looked into it, and I can actually put a PayPal donation button on a page, so people can just click on it and donate straight away into the FEPOW Family account, which I think is a good idea. What do you think?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a decent idea. We have got about 45 now, and one member of Facebook said that they'd like to donate, but they don't want to be tied down to £25 a year. So I think that would bring in some new members. I keep mulling over the idea of putting the fee down so we get more members, and therefore that'll counteract putting the fee down. But I think we'll see how we go with donations and trying to get some new members, and then we'll go from there. And then I'll put it to you later on during the year if you think that's best to put the membership fee down. At the moment, it's gone quite haywire. So we've got 580 members now on Facebook, which is quite good, and that's quite active. So Facebook is quite active. It's gone along quite nicely. Yeah, I got this from Australia, funny enough, Kevin. And do you know Bill Stedding?
No, not really.
No. Well, he sent me. Can you see all this? There's about 12 pages for my viewing only. But then when I read it, I thought that's too good just for my viewing only. It's a complete statement on him being a civilian and going into Changi, and it's all that really is good. It follows what they were told to take to Changi, what dates and what times they were supposed to meet to go to Changi, where they were put in Changi, how many civilians exactly there were. It really is a tremendous article or pages or testament, whatever you like to call it. But I have been in touch with him, and he has talked to his family, and he's agreed I can put it on Far Eastern Heroes. So I'm going to have to go through it and copy it all into Far Eastern Heroes, which is quite a lot to copy. But I think it's got to be read because it's too good an article to keep in a drawer. I mean, a lot of civilians will want to read this because it explains what the police. They stayed at a police station the first night, and explains what state the police station was in, and that's quite a good article. So anyway, so that I will be putting on when I get time. At the moment, I'm quite hectic. The FEPOW Day, I did push it quite a bit, and we've got quite a bit of response. So hopefully now people are thinking of it as FEPOW Day, and we'll push it along every year. Disappointing because I took my sister down to Great Yarmouth FEPOW Memorial. There wasn't any wreaths or flowers or anything at there. This was yesterday, and it was a bit disappointing. But then Pauline Simpson said they're going to have a session there on Sunday, so maybe people are leaving it till Sunday. But I did put the FEPOW Day into the Yarmouth Mercury Memories, because I'm a member of that, and I got about 150 responses. So there's a lot of Yarmouth people maybe might make it down there for the service on Sunday. Right, anything you have been doing about FEPOW Day?
Yeah,
No?
for myself.
I saw yours, Kevin, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't even think about my father's story. He actually comes from a small village in Northumberland, and they have their own web page like on Facebook. And of course, I put it onto there for them, and they made a big thing of it. They put it onto a main page about the FEPO thing, purely because they come from that village. My uncle did as well, so I was quite happy with that. I could see the members in that village as well. So that was quite good.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking, do I put it on? Don't I put it on? But I mean, the Great Yarmouth, we did have a lot of Norfolks, in the 18th Division. So, and mainly the 4th, mainly we were the 4th in Yarmouth. And actually, the response I got was quite. I thought, are they going to take it off because it's Yarmouth Memories? But no, they left it on, and it went quite well. So I was quite chuffed with that. The only problem is I found out, really, I've been noticing that you can't share anything from our Facebook, FEPOW Family. And I haven't really done much about it. I just thought, well, fair enough. But that's because it's a closed group. Because we're a closed group, you can't share a post. The only thing you can do is click on it, copy, and paste it. But I did put the FEPOW Day on my homepage and told people they could share it from there, and I got about 39 shares, so that went quite well. People, the Great Yarmouth Mercury isn't a closed group. Just a minute, I'm trying to find out how many shares I got on the Great Yarmouth Mercury. That's quite a lot. No, I can't see it. There was quite a few. There's about 100 shares, so that was quite good. So they shared our FEPOW poster, which I made a few years ago, for FEPOW Day. So that's been shared quite a lot. So hopefully, FEPOW Day, we might have another lease of life with it. Ray,
What?
your
Yes, sir.
finds. Come on, tell us about them.
Well, are you impressed, Ronnie?
I was very impressed with them. How did you get them back?
I'm not.
Oh,
I didn't even try. Thailand's getting a little bit stricter with its border crossings, and I had, without sounding too dramatic, I had my collar felt as I went into Thailand this time. There were a rather, I don't know what you call it, it's a sort of innocent thing I did in 2012. I went to Thailand, and the visa I had was only a 30-day visa on entry, but I was staying 6 weeks. So partway through the trip, I nipped over the border to Laos for a couple of days, bearing in mind that the border is 1 hour's drive from Ubon Ratchathani, and people go there all the time, you know. So, I mean, I just went over the border. We had a long weekend there. Spent 3 or 4 days in a town called Paksay, and came back, and I got a 15-day visa on arrival, which allowed me to stay the extra few days in Thailand. And I've been back to Thailand about 8 or 9 times since then, and never had a single problem, except this time when some Jobsworth border policeman sort of inspected my passport very closely, and he said that he accused me, in the loosest sense of the word, of doing a border crossing to get a visa extension, and he said, "You're not allowed to do that." So Bernard's joined us, so don't do it again. And but this time, you see, what I did this time, because I was staying over 30 days, I went to Hull and I got a 3-month single entry visa, which allowed me to stay for 60 days. So I preempted the problem this time. And when he stamped that visa, instead of putting the 3rd of July, which is when I entered, he put the 3rd of June. And I didn't spot it until I was out of passport control, and I thought, oh, this, I'm not going back. I didn't argue with him, because you don't argue with these guys. He didn't cause me a problem. He just very mildly rebutted me for what he thought was an error, which may have been, but it was perfectly legitimate. So on those counts, Ronnie, it's a long answer to the question. I decided not to break any rules by taking things out of Thailand.
I could just see you trying to go through that bomb.
Yeah.
That bomb case. That would have looked a bit suspect.
I know. Yeah. I love saying to people, you never guess what I bought in Thailand, and they'll give some guesses and say, I bought a Japanese bomb. And I love the next question from them, you know.
It looked quite impressive.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so what, you left it with your wife?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I left it with, she thinks I've gone ting-tong. I've left the bomb casing with, I've got 19 bricks from the kitchen oven, which are there, plus a box full of metal which I've dug up from the airfield. And to be honest, it rightly belongs in Ubon. You know, it's Ubon's property. It's part of Ubon's history, and if I bring something home, you know, what's it going to do?
Yeah. Did you say they were going to start a museum there?
Well, they have got a museum already, which is not bad. Yeah, and I, right at the very beginning of this thing, when I got involved with this Thai group of people, that I said to them, I'd like a little corner in the museum to put something about the prisoner of war camp there, and it's still an ongoing sort of desire for me to do that. But I think it's boosted this last trip by finding these materials. But also, significantly, I had a meeting with the governor of Ubon Ratchathani. And just to put that into context, it's about the equivalent of Andy Burnham, who's the mayor of Manchester. You know, it's that it was lucky to get a meeting that we thought would only last 10 minutes, and it lasted 25. And he was very, very interested in the project, you know, and he wants to promote it, particularly in the local schools. and he was interested in seeing the photographs taken by Major Smiley. So I've sent him an email. I'm emailing him now with these photographs. So he's certainly got a genuine interest, and I think if it gets a few more artifacts of interest, then it won't be such a big step to get that in the museum in Ubon, particularly with the bomb. I mean, it's a bit of a. I mean, what can I do with it? I bought it. It cost me 20 quid, and people say, well, "What do you spend that for?" But its future is assured now. It's mine. You know, it's not going to get beaten up and put on the back of some pickup. There's something or other that some Thai bloke thinks he can, use, and that's it. But so I'm preserving things, and hopefully I can get these in the museum at some stage. But one other thought, and maybe we can get some feedback from you guys, is that if I did bring something back, where would it go? What would be the rightful place to put a few bricks from a POW's kitchen oven in the UK? Because it's no good them sitting in my front room. I mean, people need to see them. Good morning or good evening.
Mrs. Fryer.
Hello, Mrs. Fryer.
That's the one we feel sorry for.
Yeah.
They said that's the one we feel sorry for.
Right.
Well, I don't know, you guys. What?
Just a minute, Bernard.
Ron,
Can you hear me, Bernard?
I've had awful trouble getting on. I managed to get on with my tablet. I can't get on with the PC at all.
Yeah.
It just keeps on loading and nothing comes on.
Well, you're okay with this. I mean, we can see you all right. Such a
But you're
pretty
all
face.
small. You're all
Yeah.
small people. You're ditty people.
yeah. You get a lot of diddy people in Wales, don't you? Oh, that's nice to see you again, Bernard. Like you, I lost our dog. I know you lost yours.
Yeah, 5 weeks.
Yeah, it's part of the family, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, we still keep, because Oz was blind and everything, so we still keep making sure. I turn around and make sure I left the door open so we don't bang into it. And he's now been gone 2 weeks. But yeah. But,
my son's dog is here because he's living with us now, and he keeps going down trying to dig him up.
Yeah, I was looking yesterday for memorials so I could get a plaque to put on his. We got his ashes, so I put a plaque on his ashes outside in the garden because he loved the garden. But no, let's get off dogs because that's not what we're here for. But that really hit us hard. But anyway, mind you, he's 18, so he had a good life. Yours was getting on, wasn't he, Bernard?
He was going on 19, yeah.
Yeah, so they had good lives. I mean, that's 126 in human life equivalent. Right. So that's good life.
Did you say
let's
Ubon?
Get back to the FEPOW.
Ronnie, did you say Ubon life then, or human life?
Ubon. I got it right, haven't I? Ubon.
Yeah, I thought you said it's a good Ubon life.
No, a good life.
No, a good life, right.
Yes, we're Norfolk. We talk proper. We pronounce our words proper. Taters are potatoes. Everything is shortened. And that's why he used to say Ubon. That's Ubon now. I've got it right. Ubon. I got it right. But I can't say the other bit.
So like I was saying that
go on.
If I did bring something back, I would like to make sure it's going to go to the right place, and it would make it easier to bring it out of Thailand, I think. If I did get stopped at customs, any sort of museum, the Imperial War Museum or anything like that. If they show an interest, then they can get a letter from them, which will help.
We'll have a word with Keith and see if they'd want it in their place.
Yeah.
But
but that's for the future, and I need to make sure I've got plenty of baggage allowance when.
I can just see you trying to bring bricks back. If you brought bricks back with a bag of cement, you could say you were going to use them. That'd be your own use.
Yeah. But it was good fun, and I'm glad I took the metal detector because that's now opened the door. I've got permission from the army, who strangely own the airfield, to use the metal detector and dig things up. And they came out, I met them at the airfield the first time. And luckily, I'd say within 2 minutes of switching the metal detector on, we found something. And the thing that we found, we seem to all agree, looks like a bullet. There's sort of, I don't know what the right word is for metal to deteriorate, but it certainly got the shape, and the guys seem to think it was a bullet, and they're soldiers, so they're a bit closer to it than I am. And it turned on their interest a lot, particularly a couple of guys. They wanted to have a go themselves, and they've invited me to back to their camp to give a talk on the airstrip, which I thought was great because that gets their interest going.
Yeah.
The Air Force are a bit more.
I'm just going to let my dog. We've got right.
Oh.
It's not ours. We're keeping it for someone.
Right. The Air Force are a bit more stuffy.
I'll let him out because otherwise he keeps going around my legs and scratching my legs. Right, go on then.
Yeah, the Air Force are a bit more stuffy. They don't actually own the airstrip, but we needed to get permission from them to fly the drone. And the permission was to take photographs. I couldn't work this out because I've been taking photographs of the airstrip for the last 3 years, and you can go on Google Earth and look at the sites, without any problem. But anyway, this is Thailand, so we jumped through the hoops and got their permission. But they turned up at the airstrip, and we had to show our ID, which they took photographs of. The guy who had the drone had to produce his license and a letter that we got signed by the commander. And then they told us that we couldn't fly it over the airstrip, over the part of the airstrip that's been covered over by vegetation in the last 70 years. Because at the end of this vegetation is a wireless radio station that is run by the Air Force.
Yeah.
And that's apparently a sensitive area. Except that about 2 weeks before, we went to this radio transmission station to have a look. The doors were open, but nobody was inside. And we took photographs of it anyway. So, So anyway, the good news about it is that whilst in Bangkok, I took the opportunity to visit the Royal Thai Air Force Museum at Don Muang Airport, which, as you know, Don Muang was the airport that all the prisoners flew out of to Rangoon on their way back to England, or the British prisoners at least. And there's a fantastic museum there. If you get the chance, you should go and see it, because they've got all the old planes going back to 1915 there, and some great photographs and history, as well as, if you're an airplane fan, then there's lots of examples of helicopters and jets and all sorts. But I managed to track down an officer who'd been in the Air Force, I think he said for 30 years, is an officer, and he is now researching the history of the Thai Air Force. So we had a really good, his English is excellent, and we had a really good chat, and I've established email contact with him now, and I've sent him information about Ubon, photographs of the airstrip, and taken by reconnaissance flights, and he's promised to dig out information on Ubon and send it back to me. And already he's sent some information about an airstrip that was used near Ubon in the skirmish that the Thai people had with the French in the Indochina War just before the Second World War, 1939, which wasn't officially a war, but there was quite a few people died and quite a few battles took place. And apparently there was an airstrip near Ubon that was used by the Air Force in that encounter. So,
what was the skirmish about then? Because I haven't heard of that one.
Well, what it was about was the French government owned what was called French Indochina, which is made up of today is made up of Laos, Vietnam, and Cambodia. And when I try and get this story right as quickly as I can, when the Germans invaded France, the time of Dunkirk, and they marched on to Paris, they took over the government, and what was called the Vichy government was formed in France. And Hitler wasn't particularly too bothered about the southern half of France. He was more concentrating on the coastline and the north, so he could invade Great Britain. So he let the Vichy government rule France and also the foreign colonies, of which French Indochina was one of them. The Japanese saw an opportunity when the Vichy government took over, because they were extremely weak and vulnerable, as you would imagine, and the Japanese recognized this. So they poured into Indochina in the northern part of Vietnam, and they made an agreement with the Vichy government of only allowing something like 10,000 troops in. But of course, the Japanese being the Japanese, they put in more like 50,000 and started to spread south, and eventually to places like Saigon, Hanoi, and all these other places where they recognized that they would take an opportunity to expand in Southeast Asia, and move on to Malaysia and Burma and all these places. They started training in Indochina, because up to now the Japanese war with China was a land-based war in a completely different environment. They'd never done any sea landings, any sea invasions. They'd not got any jungle training, so they used this northern part of French Indochina to train up to with this type of warfare, particularly the island of Hainan. Don't know if you know that. That's a very popular holiday resort now, but that was completely smothered with Japanese training for the invasions. Meanwhile, they recognized that Thailand was the key country to invade Malaya and go on to Singapore and also Burma. So from a political point of view, they wanted to soften up Thailand and get them on their side, because Thailand, being a neutral country, wasn't favouring anyone in particular, the Allies being on the one side, Britain and America, and the Japanese being on the other. So they started to flood in lots of things like education, defence, trade. Treaties were drawn up just to try and soften them up. But the Thais also recognised that they had some border disputes with the French on the borders with Indochina, particularly in the north. In the south, near Bangkok, a place called Balancebang. That's wrong, but it's somewhere there. But also on the border near Ubon, because the Mekong is the natural border between the two countries. But because of treaties and cessations and one thing and another, it got a little bit confused in certain areas. And Indochina claimed land that was actually on the Thailand side of the Mekong in these areas. And that's what the Thais were a bit iffy about. So when they saw the vulnerability of the Vichy government, they started infiltrating to get that back. There was a few non-aggression treaties that were drawn up at the same time. One non-aggression with the French and one with the British, because of course Thailand had borders with Britain as well, with Malaya and Burma. But these sort of fell apart when the Vichy government, when the Germans invaded France. So they fell apart, and the Vichy government failed to recognise the treaties. And although they'd signed them, they didn't actually ratify them in their laws. So these skirmishes started, and it was one. They started prodding each other, and the prods got harder and harder until, in the end, some French planes flew over the north of Thailand and dropped some bombs, and a few people were killed in an area called Nakhon Sakon. Sorry. And of course, then where the hotspots of these borders were where the battles took place, and there was no formal declaration of war. It was just like, I fail to say handbags at dawn, but you know what I mean. It was that kind of thing. Until in the end, there was a naval battle off the island of Koh Samui, which the Thais lost completely hands down, because their navy was far inferior to the French. And then at that point, the Allies said, enough is enough. You've got to sort this out, otherwise this is getting out of hand. But the Allies, the Britain and America and Australia, didn't want to be intermediary in the negotiations. So the Japanese, seeing an opportunity, jumped in, and because they got the thumbs very firmly on top of the French, and they wanted to seduce the Thai into favouring them a bit more, they negotiated in Tokyo in mid-1940s, a treaty which gave the Thais what they wanted and took away from the French what they wanted to keep. So that's when the Thais started to get more friendly with the Japanese on top of everything else. And that's it, Ronnie. That's the history behind that.
Yeah, I didn't know that bit about French Indochina. I mean, my dad ended up at French Indochina, Saigon. That's where he finished the war. After the railway, he was sent in February 1945 to Saigon. But yeah, have you found out in all your research, Ray, if the Thais did know Japan were invading Malaya at that time?
Yeah, I think the politics is very much part of what I've been looking at. What you've got to remember is that in 1932 there was a coup d'etat, very soft one, where up to that point Thailand was ruled by the monarchy. It was a monarchist state, but it wasn't working. Thailand wanted to get a bit more modern. Things were happening in between the First War. United Nations were getting established, or the League of Nations as it was, and they wanted to be part of the world rather than being insular. So that this coup d'etat took place, and the monarchy wasn't completely ruled out, but it became a constitutional state. So a new constitution was written up, and a couple of guys started to emerge. One was called Priddy, and the other was called Peeble. And it's a bit like Corbyn and May. You know, they both hated each other. They had different politics, but Peeble was the prime minister, and his personal views were more right wing than anybody's. He was a complete nationalist. He liked the work that Hitler did. He was a supporter of Hitler, and he was very easily seduced by the Japanese. But Priddy and most of the cabinet, I must add, were very sceptical of this. And when you read the memoirs of people like Josiah Crosby, who was the British foreign minister in Thailand at that time, you can see where the discussions were going, that Priddy was appealing to the British and the Americans for help, but we were preoccupied and our attention was elsewhere. In Europe we had enough to deal with at the time. So there was all these sort of threats, and it was just progressing step by step by step until it got to the point where the Japanese just invaded. And you know the story about the invasion, I presume, where just hours after Pearl Harbor, the Japanese had already set sail from Indochina, and they actually landed on Thai soil, but they demanded permission from the Thai government.
We were supposed to have seen this fleet, hadn't we? We were supposed to have spotted it.
Yeah.
Coming in.
Crosby intelligence came across through the British, warning the Thai government that the Japanese were on the way, and the Japanese had already asked for permission to go across the land because they wanted to go into Malaya and Burma. But Peeble, the Prime Minister, was, I have to be careful what I say, but he was absent from his office. He was visiting another part of Thailand, was non-contactable, because don't forget, this is before the days of proper telephones, never mind internet and stuff like that. And transport was very awkward. So the Japanese foreign minister called on Peeble's office, but he wasn't there. The deputy prime minister, a chap called Abdul, obviously had to take the call, but he called his foreign minister, a chap called Derek Jayanaman, because he saw it as a foreign affair, Japan and so on. He was just trying to buy time, really. Well, I don't think necessarily he was passing the buck, but he was trying to buy time. And Jayanaman went into discussion with the Japanese and stalled them. But they said, well, look, you've got 2 hours to make your mind up. This is at midnight on December the 8th. And a cabinet meeting was called, and it met all through the night until Peeble turned up at his office at 7 o'clock in the morning. And he went back into the Japanese and came back with 3 proposals. One was that the Japanese would just invade, and he said, yes, you can do that, but you mustn't meddle with our affairs. We just want to keep our own government, and you can come into our land but not do anything. The other one was they would invade, but as a reward for invasion, they would get back more property, more land that was in dispute in the northern part of Burma. And the third option, I can't remember offhand what the third option was. However, what the cabinet agreed was that they had no option because battles were raging down in places like Songla and Phetchabun Kirikan, all those areas, and lives were being lost. Thai lives were being lost at this stage. They had no credible defences, really. They were fighting with guns and ammunition, but they were also using pickaxe handles and shovels. It was down to that, and it was untrained civilians, apart from the police and the army, that were resisting the Japs, or the Japanese, sorry. So in the end, they said, yes, you can enter Thai jurisdiction, but then they called off the resistance and allowed them free passage, and that's where it all started.
Because we understood that's where they were going to land, and of course we set up Matador, which was our first blunder. We never used it. There's so many problems from our hierarchy in Singapore. They just wouldn't make decisions, would they?
No.
But that has made a lot of sense, because you hear that the Thais were friendly and let the Japanese land, but I didn't know all the rest of it, what you said, particularly French Indochina. I didn't realise about French Indochina and the border problems.
Yeah, well, there's quite interesting story there, but of course the Japanese only occupied French Indochina up until I think it was the back end of 1944, when they realised that they were on the back foot, so they actually took over the government of Indochina.
Because they did use Saigon. Was a lot of the POWs were sent to Saigon in 1942, weren't they?
Yeah.
So they did use Saigon, but as you said, they most likely just used part of Saigon.
Yeah.
Or part of French Indochina.
And when the Japanese took over the running of Indochina, that's when Thailand realised the threat was increased, because although the Japanese occupied Thailand, there was a great danger that the Japanese would then take over the running of Thailand as well, and that was a great threat early 1945. But just going back, if I may, to the time when the Japanese actually landed in Thailand, permission was given by people, but it was only by the narrowest of margins, and the Thai backs were against the wall. They had no choice but to do that. But there was a lot of anti-Japanese feeling generated right at that very moment, and Priddy, who was the opposite of Peeble, within hours he was having meetings with his fellow cabinet members about setting up the Seri Thai Free Thai movement. So right at the very beginning of this, the opposition was being organised, and of course it took a long time for the Seri Thai resistance movement to become established. But it wasn't helped by the fact that on January I think it was the 27th, Thailand actually declared war on Great Britain, America and Australia. And Great Britain accepted this declaration. So technically, Great Britain from January 1942 were at war with Thailand.
Yeah.
The declaration was never delivered to the American government, and there's a whole story behind that as well. So technically, America were not at war with Thailand. But then you get the very interesting scenario going into 43, 44 and into 45, where the Seri Thai resistance movement of Thailand were asking Great Britain for help. And Churchill had this dilemma of saying, well, hang on,
Were you?
we're at war with Thailand, and we've got some high-ranking politician asking for help. What do we do? The Americans didn't have that problem, but the Americans had a problem with Britain because of our colonial thoughts of what we wanted or what we might have wanted in a peace agreement after the war ended. And America was a bit iffy about Great Britain's ambitions for securing Thailand as a colony and getting Malaya and Burma and all the rest of it back under their control. So you got all this tension, particularly at the back end of 1944, about who was going to do what and who was going to help who and how they were going to do it. But time was quickly running out, and eventually,
Yeah, I mean, going by what my dad said, he found the Thais very friendly, helpful, and they'd supply him with food and everything. So the ordinary Thai, I suppose that's a bit like the brown shirts in England. We had right wingers, of course, and I suppose that was a movement that wasn't the whole people who wanted it. It was just a minority wanted the Jats, like Mosley and the brown shirts. So the ordinary dad said he got on really well with the Thais. He found them very friendly. He told me one silly little story. He said when they were going up to Thailand, Dad was in the July party, so that was one of the early parties. Well, he was in the first train from Singapore to Thailand. And he said at the stations, the Thai were coming along and they were buying food and giving them watches and everything for food. And he said one of the boys asked for some food. And as the train was pulling out, he got the food and dangled his watch all the way along the platform and put it back on. But no, Dad said they were very friendly.
Yeah, I think the ordinary Thai people were very friendly and still are, and also they're opportunists like anybody else. So I mean, the Japanese certainly in Ubon they incentivized the local population for intelligence. So if anybody escaped, which they did on a couple of occasions, then for a few baht, they were quite willing to name names and tip people off. But equally, they would get as much out of the Japanese as they could by scamming them as well. The story I put on about the false baskets.
There was 10 who escaped from Songkhla. Have I pronounced that right? Songkhla.
Yeah.
Songkhla. Anyway, the 10 that escaped from there, they were given up by Thais, weren't they? No, they were Burmese, weren't they? Because that's in Burma, isn't it? Yeah, it's just over the border, I think. It's just over the border, isn't it, Martin?
No, it's just before the border. Yeah, it's before Three Pagodas.
So it is in Thailand.
It's in Thailand,
yeah. Yeah, they were. Well, yeah, but was it the Burmese who gave them up? Because the 10 were on their way to the Burma coast, weren't they? But were they in Burma when they were given up by the locals to the Japanese? Because they were heading for the coast in Burma, across to the coast when they were captured. Anyway, getting away from that. Right, thank you, Ray. That was ever so interesting. I learnt a lot from that because I didn't. You tend to hear that the Thai government allowed the Japanese to land, but you didn't. You've opened it up a bit. You've opened it up so we understand it a lot more. I didn't understand about French Indochina, the border problems. Didn't understand that. Right, Bernard. I hear you haven't been on lately.
No.
Yeah, but you're here now.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, when I put this on our website, I have to put starring Bernard, and I haven't been able to star Bernard lately.
But you can do it. You can give me back ones, can't you, Ron?
Yeah. Yes, it is good to see you, Bernard. But don't worry too much about your computer. If you're having trouble with that, you can get on with this on your tablet. So I wouldn't worry too much about your computer. I mean, we can see you okay.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing, Ron?
I'm not committing myself, Bernard. But anyway, I see that Louise has put on a Facebook page for her book, or the book on the dog, and yeah, Scrumptious, was it? Yeah, the dog she wrote the book about.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah, she's put on a Facebook page. So anyone who's willing, please like it, because that's a nice little book. That's a nice little book for children, and it does open your eyes, or open children's eyes, to somebody being away at war, without going into it in too many horrible details. That tells the story of her father, Reverend Cordenly, being away at war, and the dog sitting at the gate waiting for him for three and a half years. And then still, when he came home, the dog still sat at the gate for a week before he realised he was at home. So yeah, that's a nice little story. So as I say, if anyone wants to go into it, it's I think it's Scrumptious, the book. What is it, Bernard? Louise's book.
I can't think of the name of the dog now.
I think it's Scrumptious, isn't it? Scrumptious?
Scrunchball.
Scrunchball. That's it. Scrunchball.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you look it up on Facebook and just like it, because she deserves it to be liked, because there's something different. You know, there is something different about, you know, the war and everything.
Can you put a link on there, Ronnie, to the?
Yeah, I'll find a link to it and I'll put it on. I'll put it on. Right, Martin, do you want to talk for a little while about your book, how you're getting on with your book and everything, and I'll try and find Scrumptious. All right.
Yep.
You carry on, and I'll try and find it.
Okay. Yeah. So. Sorry.
Go on, Martin. That was, I think,
Okay.
that was Ray's timer.
Okay. Yeah. So the book has gone very well. Had a lot of interest in locally in Australia, which has been fantastic, and getting some really good support from the UK as well. So really promising. So I'm starting to look at trying to get it into some bookshops and some outlets at the moment. So hopefully want to try and get it into Singapore, because I haven't actually got much exposure there at the moment. But the feedback that I've been getting has been fantastic, and you know, I'm really pleased that people are actually, you know, enjoying the read and getting something from it. So it's been really, really good. Outside of that, we're actually planning to go back to Thailand in October for another visit. We're a little bit apprehensive about what the weather's been like up there, so Ray can probably throw a bit more light on that, because I understand that the dams are reaching capacity up at Tompa Pum, which is around the Tarkanan area. So I've heard reports that it's close to 90% full at the moment, and some pretty high risk of flooding. Is that right, Ray? Have you heard reports?
I have. This morning I had a quick look on Bangkok Post, and there's weather warnings in the north. There's been a very heavy low depression centering around the north in the Burma area, but it's been downgraded to just heavy downpours. But there's more rain on the way.
Yes.
You know, I don't know whether there's more rain this year than previous years, but It's certainly wet. And I
Yeah,
think it's the rivers. It's like you say, it's the dams that cause the problems, because once they get full, there's nowhere for the water to go other than flooding the
absolutely.
floodplains. And we experienced a little bit of that in Ubon whilst I was there. Had a few very heavy downpours, and they've created some flood. What do they call it? Flood alleviation schemes or whatever in the village where Camma lives, and those areas got really full overnight. But after a week or so, it subsided back to normal levels. So they're trying to manage it, but there will come a point where 90% gets to 95%, and then that's where the problems start. And the problems in
Absolutely.
India at the moment, I know it's a long way from where we are, but they've had heavy rains down there and landslides and all the rest of it, which is causing great problems. So take your swimming trunks, Martin.
It sounds a bit that way, because a lot of the photographs that I've seen people taken recently showing that even the river is struggling to hold its banks at the moment as well. So they're obviously releasing a lot of water to try and relieve the pressure in the dam, and that's causing obviously problems downstream. And I saw some photographs that Andrew Snow took recently up at Arrow Hill Camp, and that was completely underwater. Wampo, it's completely flooded along that region, and I guess that the other thing too is that because of all the rains, and the jungle's going to be pretty thick and dense this time around as well. So I guess the vegetation's going to be thick and pretty well grown over.
Yeah.
So
I did see the river at Chungkai had risen above the landing stage.
Right.
I was there earlier this year and used that landing stage, and it was quite a step up. And knowing how wide the river is at that point, for it to have flooded the landing stage and beyond, that's an awful lot of water coming from somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, before we go any further, I have found it.
All right.
Yeah, so it's called Eric and Scrunchball. And she'd like a lot of likes. So that's a nice little book for children.
Yeah.
And that's the Scotty dog. And that's the book.
Brilliant.
Excellent.
That's the book. That is a really nice book, and that's her dad, Eric Cordenly.
Gosh,
who Bernard knows took the cross up Thailand. Yeah, your dad's cross.
That's right. Have you seen my father's watch on her site?
Your father's?
My father's pocket watch.
Yeah.
No. Oh, no, I haven't.
He's put that on there.
Oh, I'm looking down at it and I can't see it.
You see, my father bought a watch on his way to Singapore on a troop ship. They stopped off at Cape Town, and my father bought a watch, and he inscribed inside the back of it, Cape Town 1941. Of course, I was given my father's watch at the age of 15 or 16, and I dropped it, and it hasn't worked since. So we're trying to get it repaired.
Yeah. I mean, if you should be able to get it repaired, though, shouldn't you, Bernard?
Well, I don't know, Ron. I don't. Yeah. It's quite old, and she also put on there a picture of my father's banjo. You haven't seen that? I did send you a picture.
Yeah, I think you might be talking about her other site, because she's got the Changi Cross Facebook site as well. So she could have put it on there.
Could
I
be.
mean, if you look up the Changi Cross, she runs that one as well, doesn't she?
Yes.
So anyway, so that's the page. That's called Eric and Scrunchball.
That's right.
Yep.
So that would be nice if we put a few likes on for her. Yeah, that's a different type of book. I mean, that's a good book really to go into a school because just don't have to tell children about the dying and the killing and everything. It's just that he was away for that length of time and the dog missed him for 3.5 years, which is it brings it home, doesn't it?
Makes you think, Ron, whether the dog knew that he wasn't dead.
Yeah, that's strange, isn't it? But then
Yeah.
when I was really a small child, my dad used to take me to see my grandma's grave in Galston, and we always used to visit a grave with a effigy model of a dog laying on the tomb. And Dad said that when the person died, the dog wouldn't leave the grave. He just laid there and died. So they put a model of the dog actually on the tomb itself, on the grave, which is that's a bit different to your dog trying to dig up your other one, Bernard.
Yeah.
Anyway, go on, Mark. I'm sorry to interfere.
No, that's all good. So we're gonna head back up to Thailand again. It's a shame we'll miss Ray because I think we'll only be sort of probably a matter of weeks apart from when you head back out there. So we're going to head back up in October and spend probably 3 weeks up there this time. And so we want to do a little bit more research around Tarkanoon again. That sort of seems to be the area that we like to focus on, which is Tompapum. And so, hence that's why we got a few concerns about what the weather conditions have been like up there. With the flooding and so forth, so hopefully it will subside some before we get there. So I've been doing a fair bit of reading.
Yeah. What's it been like in
Sorry?
Australia then? What's it like in Australia?
Australia's such a vast country, of course. There's a vast difference between the west and the east. Yeah. So the east is pretty much in drought at the moment. They've got major problems with some of the inland agricultural areas being in drought.
Is that where you are?
And no, we're in the west on the west coast, and so we've had
Melbourne, which is on the east.
Right. Yes. Well, which is on the south coast of East Coast, but in the west we've had the wettest start to August in about 7 decades, they claim. So we've had about 100 mils of rain in the last 2 or 3 weeks. So there's massive difference between what happens, one side of the country to the other. So, but we're just coming out of winter now, of course, and going into spring, first September. So we're looking forward to that.
Well, our garden, our grass is absolutely brown. We've had such.
I bet.
We had really hot weather for about 6 weeks, and but this last 2 weeks we have had some rain, and you can see the new grass coming through. But that has been very, very hot. Too hot.
Yeah.
Laying in bed at
we've been
night,
watching all the reports.
Really too hot. But anyway, Martin.
Yes.
Oh, Kevin. Sorry.
Kevin.
Come on, Kevin. We're getting past 11 o'clock, so we want your intro.
Yeah, right. Going back to the FEPOW Day, Ronnie. Last weekend I was at the Arboretum, and I met up with a man called Jeff Graham. His father was on the Repulse, and he actually ended up in the same camp as my dad, so that was interesting meeting him. I could come all the way down from Newcastle, so I arranged to meet him, and I arranged to meet him on the the Sumatran Railway they've got there.
Yeah.
So I was having a great chat with him. That was good.
Yeah. Is it? Have they got plenty going on with the Sumatran Railway? When you go and have a look around. do they have guides and everything like they do on the Thailand-Burma Railway?
Oh, this is at the Arboretum, Ronnie. They've got it.
Oh,
They've
the
got a,
Arboretum.
yeah.
You've been to Sumatra, though, haven't you?
No, I haven't been there.
No, you haven't. Oh,
No,
I just
no.
wondered if they
Oh,
have the same type of thing as they've got on the
yeah.
Thailand-Burma Railway.
Oh no, this is just a section of railway they've got at the
Oh,
Arboretum.
yeah. I
Section
just
of the
wondered.
Thai Burma, yeah. And they've got
Yeah,
a section
because
of the Sumatran railways.
yeah, because I think I told you once before we had one Ed, something like that. Ed, his name began with E, and when we talked about the railway, he got really, really upset. There is another railway, that's the Sumatra Railway, and he used to go on and on about it. You've got to be so careful. So that's why you normally say the Thailand-Burma Railway, so I don't upset people. I just wondered if they had something. I know Rod Beatty's different because he's made it a lifetime thing, hasn't he? Although I think he's left now, hasn't he, Martin?
Well, he's currently in Australia, but he's back up in Thailand in the middle of September.
He is going to go back.
So he's
Um,
so he's on a family home trip at the moment.
yeah, but I just wondered if the Sumatra Railway had that same. Well, not with Rod, but you could. If people went to see it, would they see anything, or would it just be jungle? Do you know, Kevin?
No, I don't know. I was actually
Yeah.
just recently looking at there. Lizzie Oliver's got a website about the Sumatran Railway. That's quite interesting.
Yeah,
I was having to read it. That was quite good.
yeah.
Because
Because your dad was on it, wasn't he?
no, he wasn't on the Sumatran
Oh,
Railway, but some of his unit ended up on the Sumatran Railway. So
yeah,
I've took a bit of backstory into his unit. As I say, I've traced a few of them. They actually ended up on the Sumatran Railway because the ship they was sunk, which I think was the Dragonfly. They ended up on an island and then eventually ended up trying to get through to Padang to escape up to India. But of course, by the time they got there, the Japanese had already taken over. They ended up as prisoners of war. It worked on the Sumatran Railway.
yeah. So he was on the. You think he was on Dragonfly, the chap?
Yeah, but this some of the dad's unit were on Dragonfly. My
Yeah,
father was on the Pula Sugi. That was sunk in
yeah.
the bank at it, and that's why he ended up in Muntok in
Cause
Pelham.
because the Dragonfly was where Judy the dog was on, wasn't it?
That was a grasshopper.
The Grasshopper. That's right. The three of them
But
left at the same time.
the grasshopper and the dragonfly basically got attacked together. The
Yeah,
dragonfly sunk. The grasshopper went on fire and had to beach it, and eventually that blew up. But they
yeah,
all ended up on the same island, and they all
yeah,
tried to get across to some water to escape the Padang.
yeah. That was fascinating reading it. I mean, I think I said before that when because I read about Judy years ago. I think it was 1980 something. I got the book, 1970 something, and then when somebody asked me about that wasn't the Dragonfly. There was three of them, wasn't there? The Dragonfly, Grasshopper, and there's another one. There was three
Yeah,
left
three.
at the same time. But somebody asked me about the third one, which I can't. That began with M. Can't remember the name. Mayfly, was it? Mayfly? Mayfly, was it? Anyway, that one. They asked me about that, and then when I started getting the information together with the three boots, I found that that was it the Dragonfly had Judy on board?
It was the grasshopper.
The Grasshopper had Judy on board, and I mean, fancy going all through the war as a dog when the POWs were hungry. They must have thought a lot of the dog. I mean, they ate anything, didn't they? I mean,
Must have been a fast runner.
yeah, dear. Anyway, it's 11 minutes past 11. I don't want to keep you too long because I tend to go on and on. It's been good. I've enjoyed it. Ray, I still haven't heard about the wake, So next time a meeting, I want to hear about the Thailand wake. Did you get that?
You mean when somebody's died and
yeah,
what happened?
the wake afterwards, because it's not like one of ours, is it?
Definitely not. No.
No. So I'd like to hear about that, because that'd be interesting. So if you can gather some stuff together next time we have a meeting, I'd love to hear about it.
Okay. I'll have a chat with you offline just to go through the content first, because it might upset some people. Seriously.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Is it a bit gruesome, is it?
Yeah.
Oh dear. oh hell.
Well, it's not. I wouldn't say go so far as gruesome. I'd say it's shocking, but not shocking to say, oh my God. It's like, what? That kind of shocking.
Leave it there, because now you've whetted our appetite. Yeah. You've definitely whetted our appetite for next time. So
coming soon on a video conference near you.
yeah. Anyway, that's really been good. I've enjoyed the meeting. Thank you all.
Ron,
yeah.
Ron,
go on,
before you go, would you like a quick look at my father's banjo?
Ah, great!
Oh, wow!
Oh, that's what did he sing with it, or did he just play it?
I never remember my father, you see.
No.
But I have heard that he used to go busking at the side.
Well, busking in Wales? It's a bit hilly to go busking.
Well, when I was 10-year-old, my step-grandfather used to send me to banjo lessons.
Oh.
And this was nearly as big as me.
And so you used to take that?
I used to have
play. Can you still play it?
No, I can't play it.
No.
I used to have to get on the bus with it. I struggled on the bus with it on my own.
So, Martin, is that whet your appetite? A nice banjo?
Never played a banjo before.
You played guitar, though, don't you? You played guitar.
Yeah, I have a strum. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we heard it once, didn't we? That was good. Yeah, that's something to keep, though, Bernard. That's something to treasure, isn't it? That's a beautiful.
Yeah.
That's
it's got to be a 100-year-old run.
Oh dear. Oh, yeah. Dear. That was really lovely, Bernard.
But,
so, go on.
Being 10-year-old, it was. I was made to go to these lessons, and then every evening after school, I had to practice with it, and it was a bit against the grain, if you understand, because I wanted to play with my mates.
Yeah. And guitars were then coming out, weren't they?
No, I didn't. They weren't about then.
No. Oh, good. No. Aren't you the teddy boy type?
Yes, I got the great full shoes.
yeah. Well, the teddy boy shoes were brothel creepers. Can you remember brothel creepers? Oh dear. Oh, brings it all back. Anyway, thanks to everyone. Really enjoyed it. Sorry I haven't made it lately to meetings, but I'm absolutely up to my neck in trying to get this bathroom finished. And we've had loads of coming up in the meantime. Bernard has offered to help me with the bathroom, but he got a puncture on his bike. Anyway, thanks everyone, and see you next time. I'll just turn the record off.